During the engagement party, her ex walked in holding a baby and said, "Ask her who the father is." I still remember the lights. Chandeliers dripping gold, the kind of glitter that made everyone believe in happy endings. The hotel ballroom had been transformed into a stage for Lena and me. Our engagement party, an evening choreographed to convince both families and every guest that our future was perfect. Tables overflowed with champagne, crystal glasses clinked in sync, and the laughter of relatives I hadn't spoken to in years blended into the hum of 100 conversations. I was standing by Lena, holding her hand as people lined up to congratulate us. She wore a pale dress that shimmered whenever she moved. It was supposed to be the happiest night of my life, and for a while, I almost believed it. Lena's father, Howard, raised his glass for a toast. He loved commanding a room, every word polished like a politician. He thanked everyone for coming, spoke about family honor, about building legacies together, about how I was already like a son to him. The guests clapped on cue. My parents smiled, relieved their only son had found someone who seemed to fit so well into this polished world. Then the ballroom doors burst open, the kind of sound that cuts through chatter, forcing heads to turn. Standing in the doorway was a man holding a baby in his arms. His jacket was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. I recognized him instantly. Oliver, Lena's ex. He didn't hesitate. He strode forward, ignoring the staff trying to block him, ignoring the gasps rising from the tables. He stopped in the middle of the dance floor, looked directly at Lena, and said it loud enough for the microphones to catch. "Ask her who the father is." The baby squirmed, whining, as the entire room froze. It was like time slowed. I felt Lena's fingers dig into my palm before she ripped her hand away. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. My first thought wasn't even denial, it was calculation. The baby couldn't have been more than a year old. The timing was possible. Too possible. Lena's mother, Miriam, reacted first. She stood, her pearl necklace rattling against the glass, and snapped at Oliver, calling him drunk, calling him pathetic for clinging to the past. She ordered security to drag him out. But Oliver didn't move. He shifted the baby in his arms and said again, calmer this time, "Ask her." Whispers spread like wildfire. Guests leaned into each other, some covering their mouths, others staring openly at me to see how I would react. My father looked at me with wide eyes, my mother's lips trembling as if she'd already guessed the truth. I turned to Lena. She didn't speak. She didn't deny. She just shook her head slightly, lips parting, but no sound coming out. That silence was worse than any confession. I wanted to shout, to demand an explanation, but my throat closed. The perfect stage her parents had built around us was cracking. Every glance was a dagger. Security finally pulled Oliver away, but not before he raised his voice again. "Dene doesn't lie. He deserves to know." The doors slammed shut behind him, but the damage was irreversible. Howard tried to regain control. He clapped loudly, forcing a brittle laugh. He told the guests it was a desperate stunt by a bitter ex-boyfriend, and assured them it would be handled. A few guests clapped weakly, following his lead, but most just sat stunned, whispering behind napkins. I excused myself. I don't even remember how I got from the ballroom to the hotel balcony. My head spun, my stomach knotted. The music had resumed behind me, muffled and strained, as though the celebration could be stitched back together by force. Lena followed. She stepped onto the balcony, her face pale, her hands trembling. She started talking quickly, words tumbling out about how Oliver was obsessed, how he had nothing and wanted to destroy her happiness. But she never said it wasn't true. Not once. That silence grew louder than any denial. I asked her directly. She froze, her eyes darting to the floor. She muttered that it wasn't what it looked like, that he was just trying to ruin things. She reached for me, but I stepped back. The gap between us felt wider than the whole ballroom. Miriam stormed out after her daughter, furious, demanding that I not let that trash ruin the evening. She called Oliver a criminal, an addict, anything she could throw to bury him. She told me, in front of Lena, that I needed to stand by my fiancé like a real man, because this was how families survived public humiliation, together. It was like I wasn't even a person anymore, just a pawn in their reputation game. The rest of the night blurred. Guests continued the party under Howard's orders, but no one looked at me the same. I caught the stares, the pity in some eyes, the judgment in others. I felt like I was shrinking in my own skin. When it was over, I left without touching Lena, without saying goodbye to her parents. My parents followed me silently to the car. None of us spoke on the ride home. That night I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying Oliver's words. "Ask her who the father is." I tried to convince myself it was a stunt, but the memory of Lena's silence wouldn't leave. If it was a lie, why didn't she scream back at him? Why didn't she laugh in his face? Why did she just stand there, trembling, letting her parents fight for her. I poured myself a drink and didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Oliver's face, his hand cradling that baby, his eyes locked on Lena with a certainty that cut through every excuse she tried to give. The engagement party was supposed to be the first chapter of a new life. Instead, it became the prologue to something else entirely, a descent into a truth I wasn't ready for. And deep down, I already knew this wasn't over. Oliver had lit a fire in front of everyone. If there was truth behind his words, Lena's family would do everything to bury it. Which meant if I wanted answers, I'd have to fight against people far more ruthless than I had ever imagined. The morning after the engagement party, my phone buzzed with messages. Some were from friends asking if I was okay, others from extended family pretending not to gossip, but clearly desperate for details. Every notification felt like a nail hammered into my chest. The news had already spread beyond the ballroom. People loved a scandal more than a fairy tale. Lena called. I didn't pick up. She sent a dozen texts. Please talk to me. It's not what you think. I love you. We'll fix this. The words blurred into noise. What mattered wasn't what she said now, but what she hadn't said last night. By noon, her father called me directly. His voice was firm, measured, the way a man talks when he's used to winning arguments before they even begin. Samuel, he said, you're about to be part of this family. Last night was a humiliation, but it can be contained. The worst thing you could do now is feed the flames by entertaining that lunatic's accusations. I asked him if the baby was Oliver's. Silence stretched, then Howard chuckled. Don't let desperation cloud your judgment. If you keep acting like this, people will think you're unstable. You have a future to protect. My advice, forget about him. He hung up before I could respond. It was a warning, not advice. That evening, Lena showed up at my apartment. She looked different without the glow of the ballroom. Mascara smudged, hair messy, face drawn with exhaustion. She begged me to listen, swearing Oliver was obsessed, that he'd always been manipulative, and that he was trying to ruin her happiness because he couldn't handle seeing her move on. I asked her directly, was there even a possibility the baby was mine? Her lips trembled. She said no, but the way she said it, soft and shaky, didn't give me certainty. She tried to hold me, but I pulled away. The seed of doubt had already grown roots. I decided to act. If the baby wasn't mine, I needed proof. If it was, I needed to know before they buried it. I reached out to Oliver. It wasn't easy. His number had been changed, his old friends barely spoke to him, and his address was vague. After 3 days of chasing shadows, I finally found him at a rundown duplex on the edge of town. He looked worse than at the party, unshaven, exhausted, the baby fussing in a cheap crib behind him. He didn't slam the door, though. He let me in. Oliver told me everything in a rush, like he'd been rehearsing. He and Lena had broken up right before she and I started dating. She told him she was pregnant, but said it was none of his business, and cut him off. He suspected her parents had pushed her to hide it to secure a better match. He said he tried to fight it, but lacked money for lawyers, and every time he got close, he hit walls. Paperwork delayed, lawyers backing out, people suddenly unwilling to help. He showed me photos of the baby. The resemblance to Lena was undeniable. The timing matched perfectly. He agreed to a DNA test, and for a moment, I felt hope. Finally, something solid. We arranged it through a private clinic. I paid in cash to avoid Lena's family finding out. The samples were taken, mine, Oliver's, and the baby's. It should have been straightforward. Except a week later, the results vanished. The clinic said they'd lost the samples, an internal error. They offered to redo it, but my gut screamed something darker. Someone had interfered. That same night, Oliver stopped answering my calls. When I drove back to his place, he was gone. The crib was empty. A neighbor said a black car had picked him up earlier, and they hadn't seen him since. 2 days later, Lena posted a photo on social media, her smiling with her parents at a charity event, the caption full of platitudes about family strength. She looked untouchable, as if nothing had happened. I wasn't untouchable. I was unraveling. Friends who'd been at the engagement party started pulling away. A coworker joked about baby drama during lunch, and laughter spread around the table. My boss called me into his office, concerned about the distraction my personal life was causing. It was Lena's version of the story against mine, and without proof, I looked like the villain. She leaned into it, too. Mutual acquaintances told me she'd been crying to them, saying I'd become controlling, paranoid, cruelly accusing her of things she never did. Some believed her. Some wanted to. Even my parents, though sympathetic, started hinting I should let it go. My mother begged me not to throw away a future with Lena over rumors. My father, usually firm, just sighed and told me sometimes men had to choose between pride and practicality. It felt like the walls were closing in. I considered quitting. I thought about disappearing, leaving them to their lies. But then a package arrived at my apartment with no return address. Inside was a flash drive. On it, bank transaction records, showing large transfers from an account in Howard's company to Oliver's name. Dates matched the weeks after the engagement announcement. It was the first crack, proof that Oliver had been paid. But it was also a trap, because now I knew too much. That night, my apartment was broken into. Nothing was stolen, except the flash drive. My laptop was smashed. My locks had been forced with professional precision. I reported it to the police, but they shrugged, saying without witnesses, there wasn't much they could do. I was left with nothing again. The next morning, Lena's mother showed up at my office. Miriam, always composed, always carrying herself like royalty. She didn't ask permission to enter. She walked straight in, closed the door, and told me, calmly, that I needed to stop digging into things that don't concern me. She said if I wanted any future, with or without Lena, I'd forget about Oliver, forget about the baby, and move forward. Then she leaned closer, her voice like ice. You think you're strong enough to fight us? You're not. You'll lose everything. She left me shaking. And for a while, I believed her. That week, everything collapsed faster. A rumor spread at work about inappropriate conduct with a colleague. Totally fabricated, but it stuck. My boss warned me I was on thin ice. Friends stopped returning calls. My bank account was flagged for suspicious activity, freezing a large portion of my savings. It wasn't just about Lena anymore. Her family was dismantling me piece by piece. For the first time, I thought they might succeed. I sat in my dark apartment, surrounded by broken glass from the break-in, jobs slipping away, reputation shredded, and realized I was one step from losing it all. And then, as if fate refused to let me quit, I got a call. Not from Oliver, not from Lena, but from someone else entirely. It was the clinic technician who'd handled our DNA test. Whispering, panicked. He said he'd been ordered to destroy the samples, but he'd kept backups. He couldn't talk on the phone. We had to meet. It was the first sign that the fight wasn't over. That maybe, just maybe, I wasn't finished yet. The technician's call felt like oxygen after weeks of suffocating. His voice was shaky, but he told me to meet him in a quiet park after dark. I drove there half expecting a setup, my stomach knotted, eyes scanning every shadow. He showed up late, a man in his 30s with nervous eyes and a jacket zipped up despite the warm night. He handed me an envelope sealed with tape. Inside, photocopies of the DNA test results. They were clear. The baby was Lena's. The father was Oliver. No ambiguity. For the first time since the engagement party, I had proof. The technician begged me not to mention his name. He said he'd already received warnings. He was terrified. I promised him nothing would trace back to him. Driving home, the city lights blurred outside the window, and for a brief moment, I felt the weight lifting. This was the weapon I needed. No more speculation, no more rumors, hard science. But reality hit quickly. Proof in my hand didn't mean power. I still had to use it, and Lena's family was a machine designed to crush opposition. I started carefully. I printed copies of the results and slipped them into an envelope addressed to Howard's business partner, a man named Stewart I'd met once. I didn't include my name, only the documents. I wanted to test how far the information would ripple. A week passed. Nothing. No acknowledgement, no fallout. Stewart didn't even look me in the eye the next time I saw him at an event. If anything, he was colder. Which meant one thing. Howard had intercepted it. I wasn't surprised when a letter arrived at my apartment days later. No return address. Inside, shredded photocopies of the DNA results. And a single typed line, "You are out of your depth." I burned the letter in my sink, but the threat seared itself into my brain. Still, I couldn't stop. I began collecting anything I could find. Copies of Lena's messages to Oliver, financial irregularities from her father's company that hinted at hush money, even old photos Oliver had shared of him and Lena together during her pregnancy. Piece by piece, a file began to grow. But Lena's family was always a step ahead. One night, as I left my apartment, two men approached me in the parking lot. They weren't random thugs. They were clean-cut, expensive watches flashing under the streetlights. One smiled as he said, "Drop it. Last warning." The other pushed me against my car door, hard enough to bruise my ribs, before they walked away. I wanted to go to the police, but what could I say? That my fiancé's father was orchestrating a conspiracy with hired enforcers? I had no evidence that would survive a courtroom. Then, in the middle of this nightmare, Lena came back into my life with tears and apologies. She showed up at my door, mascara streaked, hands shaking, saying she'd been under terrible pressure. She begged me to believe she loved me, that everything with Oliver had been a mistake from a past she wanted to bury. For a moment, I almost broke. The way she spoke, the way she looked at me, it hit the part of me that still wanted to believe in us. But then her phone buzzed. She froze. And for just a second, I saw the name on the screen. Miriam. She wasn't here out of love. She was here on assignment. I let her talk, let her weave her web of apologies, and when she left, I knew. The family was tightening the trap. They wanted me docile, emotional, forgiving, easier to control. I wasn't going to give them that. But the real crushing blow came from somewhere else. I walked into work on a Tuesday morning and found my access badge disabled. Security escorted me to HR, where a manager with a tight smile informed me I was being suspended pending investigation. Someone had accused me of embezzlement. I laughed at first, the absurdity of it. But then they showed me documents, forged, but polished, with my name linked to unauthorized transfers. Enough to smear me, enough to bury me under suspicion. I knew immediately who was behind it. I left the office stripped of dignity, coworkers whispering, my inbox locked, my career teetering on the edge of ruin. The last stable part of my life had been shattered. That night, I sat in my dark apartment surrounded by the remnants of the life I'd built. Friends gone, family distant, career collapsing, reputation shredded. Lena's family had dismantled me brick by brick. For the first time, I thought maybe they'd won. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. 2 days later, I received an email from an anonymous account. It contained a single file, a PDF of bank transfers I hadn't seen before. Transfers not just to Oliver, but to a network of shell accounts linked to Miriam. The note attached read, "Thought you'd find this interesting. A friend." I stared at the screen, pulse pounding. Someone inside their circle had slipped. I didn't know who the ally was, or why they'd chosen now to help me, but I knew this was the opening I needed. I studied the documents all night. The pattern was clear. Money moved from Howard's company to accounts controlled by Miriam, then funneled to Oliver. Dates matched the pregnancy, the engagement party, even the weeks after. It was a cover-up trail, undeniable if exposed publicly. But exposing it was the problem. They'd already proven they could twist narratives, discredit me, crush my reputation. If I went public blindly, they'd spin it again. I needed a stage they couldn't control, a spotlight so bright their shadows couldn't hide. I found it in an upcoming charity gala. Howard was scheduled to host, with half the city's elite in attendance. Media, donors, business partners, the kind of audience that devoured scandal. It was a risk bordering on insanity. If I failed, I'd be ruined permanently. If I succeeded, they'd never recover. I spent the next week preparing. I made multiple copies of the documents. I encrypted digital files, mailed hard copies to trusted contacts, even stashed one in a safety deposit box. If they tried to erase me, the truth would survive. The night of the gala, I walked into the venue with a calmness that felt unreal. The chandeliers glittered, the champagne flowed, and Howard worked the room like a king among pawns. Lena stood beside him, radiant, her smile rehearsed. Miriam's sharp eyes scanned the crowd, always calculating. I blended in, ignored, just another guest. When the speeches began, I moved. Quietly, methodically, I slipped envelopes into the hands of journalists, slid USB drives into the folders of donors, placed copies where they couldn't be ignored. Then Howard took the stage, voice booming about family honor, integrity, the future. And that was when the whispers started. One journalist checked her phone, eyes widening. Another donor whispered angrily to his neighbor, clutching the papers I'd planted. The ripple spread through the ballroom like a virus. Howard faltered. His speech stumbled. Miriam's face went pale. Lena's smile froze. The room turned. Questions erupted. Reporters pushed forward, cameras flashing. Accusations rang out about the transfers, the hush money, the cover-up. Howard tried to shout them down, but the noise swallowed him. Miriam collapsed into a chair, stunned. Lena's mask cracked, tears streaking her perfect makeup. I didn't stay to watch the implosion. I slipped out into the night, heart pounding, every step echoing with disbelief. For the first time in months, I felt like I'd struck back, like I'd dragged them into the light. But victories against people like them don't come clean. The next morning, I woke to headlines not just about Howard's scandal, but about me. They'd leaked a counterattack, painting me as a bitter ex-fiancé who'd fabricated evidence out of revenge. My suspension at work became proof of my dishonesty. Anonymous sources claimed I'd harassed Lena, stalked her, destroyed her family out of spite. The city didn't know who to believe. Some sided with me, others with them. But my name was still smeared. My career was still dangling. And that's when the call came. It was Oliver. His voice was hoarse, urgent. "We need to meet. Now. I've got something they don't want anyone to see." The comeback wasn't complete yet. The final blow was waiting, and it wasn't in my hands. Oliver hadn't called me since the night of the engagement party. His sudden silence, his disappearance after the failed DNA test. I'd assumed he'd been bought off, tucked away with hush money. So when my phone lit up with his name, my heart slammed into my ribs. We agreed to meet in the back corner of a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town. The kind of place where no one asked questions, where stale coffee kept the night staff alive. I arrived early, nerves buzzing. He showed up 20 minutes late, looking like he hadn't slept in days. The baby wasn't with him this time. He slid into the booth, eyes darting around. "They're watching me," he said flatly. But they slipped. And I kept receipts. From his jacket, he pulled out a battered folder. Inside were scanned letters, not bank transfers or forged paperwork, but original hospital records. Lena's name was on the birth file. So was Miriam's signature, listed as the guardian, who'd signed off when Lena refused to register Oliver as the father. Even more damning were the attached notarized statements from a nurse, apparently fired soon after, who noted family interference in the official file. It wasn't just proof of paternity. It was proof of fraud. My hands shook as I turned the pages. If this got out, there was no spin, no cover story that could bury it. This was the kind of evidence that burned bridges permanently. I looked at Oliver. He wasn't smug. He looked broken. "I should have gone to the cops months ago," he muttered. "But every time I tried, someone got to me. Money, threats, intimidation. I can't live like this anymore. My kid deserves the truth." He pushed the folder toward me. "Do what I couldn't." I took it. And for the first time in months, I felt like the scales had shifted for good. But taking them down wasn't going to be easy. They'd already smeared me, nearly destroyed me. This needed to be decisive, public, undeniable. I didn't go to the police. Not yet. I knew they'd stall, delay, or lose the paperwork. Instead, I reached out to an investigative journalist who had already been circling the gala scandal. Her name was Claire, and she had a reputation for ripping apart corporate corruption like a surgeon. We met in her office, stacks of documents and photographs cluttering every surface. I laid everything out, the DNA results, the bank transfers, Oliver's folder. She listened, eyes narrowing, jotting notes furiously. "This isn't just scandal," she finally said. "This is systemic fraud. They paid off a man to silence him, forged medical records, laundered money through shell accounts. If this blows, it won't just destroy a family, it'll destroy an empire." That was what I wanted. We worked in secret for days. Claire verified every document, cross-referenced every date, tracked down the nurse listed on the file. The woman, bitter from being fired, agreed to go on record. Piece by piece, the puzzle locked together. Meanwhile, Lena's family scrambled. Howard called me twice, leaving voicemails switching between threats and desperate pleas. Miriam showed up outside my apartment, screaming that I was ruining lives. Lena herself sent me long texts, alternating between apologies and accusations, between "I love you" and "you'll regret this." I ignored them all. The story dropped on a Monday morning. Full front-page spread, accompanied by televised coverage. Prominent business family in paternity and fraud scandal. It was brutal. Claire hadn't held back. She published the bank transfers, the DNA results, the notarized hospital files. She included testimony from Oliver, the nurse, even anonymous sources from inside Howard's company who confirmed the cover-up culture. The fallout was immediate. Howard's business partners pulled out within hours. His company's stock value plummeted, investors abandoning ship. Miriam was photographed leaving their mansion in tears, tabloids plastering her face under headlines like the matriarch of lies. Lena went into hiding, paparazzi circling her every move. But the most satisfying blow came in court. Oliver, armed with undeniable proof, filed for full custody of his child. Judges don't like liars, especially not ones who forge records. The court granted him custody on the spot, with supervised visitation for Lena only. She tried to fight, sobbing about being manipulated, about losing everything. But her crocodile tears couldn't undo what was already carved into public record. And me? For a moment, I thought I was free. But the truth is, victory didn't come without scars. Yes, Howard's empire collapsed. Yes, Miriam's reputation was shredded. Yes, Lena was left with nothing, shunned, humiliated, forced into low-paying jobs after her family's fortune evaporated. But I wasn't unscathed. The smear campaign they'd unleashed against me lingered. Some people still believed their narrative. My job? Gone for good. No company wanted to be tied to the scandal guy, even if the truth was out. Friendships I'd lost never returned. My reputation was split down the middle, half pity, half suspicion. For weeks, I asked myself if it was worth it. Then one afternoon, Oliver called. He asked me to meet him at his new workshop, a small carpentry business he'd restarted with help from sympathetic donors after the story broke. When I arrived, the baby was crawling across the floor, laughing for the first time I'd ever seen. Oliver shook my hand and said, "You gave my kid a chance I couldn't. Whatever it cost you, it mattered." That was when I realized revenge isn't about walking away spotless. It's about making sure the people who thought they were untouchable bleed. And they did. Howard declared bankruptcy within the year, hounded by lawsuits and tax investigations. Miriam disappeared from public life, rumored to be living with distant relatives overseas. Lena tried to claw her way back into my life once. She showed up outside my apartment sobbing, begging me to forgive her, to remember what we had. I didn't even open the door. She texted me that night, "You ruined me. You ruined my life." I didn't respond, because the truth was, she ruined herself. I still carry the scars. My career path detoured, my trust in people fractured. But I also carry the knowledge that I faced a machine designed to crush me, and I won. Not cleanly, not perfectly, but decisively. And in the end, that was enough.